We're a couple weeks post-launch of XDefiant, and across the internet you hear varying opinions regarding the game, ranging from "this game is the COD killer" to
"it's the biggest piece of dog shit."
there were even content creators making full review videos after self-reportedly playing only a single game up to 30 minutes max. How can we trust these reviews if the adequate time wasn't put into the game? So instead, I ask you to place your faith in me, a random stranger on the internet making his very first YouTube video, an XDefiant review. Jokes aside, I am obviously not the best XDefiant or FPS player, as you will see by the gameplay in the background, nor am I the most experienced. But I have put in a lot of time since the game's launch, have unlocked the majority of the content, and feel as though I've gotten the proper full XDefiant experience as of Preseason 0. So, is XDefiant the COD killer? Or is it complete and utter dog water? Well, the only way is to find out is to boot it up and try it out for ourselves. After waiting through the startup sequence that you must sit through each and every time you boot up the game, you are greeted by a very crisp and easy to navigate UI. I know that may seem like a very small thing to compliment a game on, but after you have played as many games as I have through the years, you come to appreciate games that keep it simple. Now, what exactly is XDefiant? XDefiant is a free-to-play, live service hero shooter FPS. Yes, I know, and we'll touch base on that a little bit later. The best way I can describe XDefiant quickly from a gameplay perspective is that it's kind of like the love child between Black Ops 4 and Overwatch. It's fast-paced, features a longer time to kill, and rewards team play around the objective. XDefiant currently has 3 playlists you can engage with: the Welcome playlist for new players up to level 25, Casual, and Ranked. Probably the biggest draw for XDefiant when it comes to the Casual playlist is that there is no skill-based matchmaking.
Yes! Yes!
This is a massive W, as it allows for you to get a varied experience when playing casually. Sure, there will be some games when you pub stomp, and then there's going to be other games when you are the free bot for the other team to farm for kills, and everything in between. I'll go ahead and put up a screenshot in editing of how the XDefiant developers prioritize the different factors when it comes to matchmaking. But in its purest sense, matchmaking goes by the mentality of ping is king. Now sure, there will be plenty of sweaty lobbies out there. This is because people are just naturally better at FPS games than they were in years past. But the important thing is that these lobbies are selected naturally. Skill level is only a factor in finding players in ranked play. In casual play, ping is king, and it sorts out the teams in sort of draft style format so that one team shouldn't be completely stacked compared to the other team. In addition to the 3 playlists, there's also a shooting range mode which you can hop to in order to warm up, test out guns, recoil, control, and how different attachments can affect weapons that you're thinking about using, and eventually a test site for testing out faction abilities will be introduced to this mode as well. This is an extremely welcome addition to the game, especially when it comes to console play, as for the most part in FPS history, console players really haven't had a safe place to go into to test out weapons and work on recoil control, other than setting up a private match or just hopping straight into casual games. There are currently 5 game modes that you can play as of the recording of this video, but it is confirmed that more will be added in the coming seasons. Currently you can play Escort, which is a payload game mode where one team attempts to push a payload to the enemy's base, Zone Control, where one team attempts to capture zones before moving on to the next set of zones, progressively working their way through the map. Domination Occupy you will recognize from Call of Duty, as Occupy is just Hardpoint but renamed. And finally Hotshot, which is essentially Kill Confirmed from Call of Duty, but each team has one member dubbed the Hotshot, which if you let them collect the bounties, any bounties they collect will count as 3 points as opposed to the usual 1. One of the biggest things you will notice after playing a few matches of XDefiant is that objective play is strongly rewarded on the scoreboard. It is entirely possible for someone having a quote-unquote average game KD-wise to wind up on top of the scoreboard if they play the objective well. This incentivizes, in conjunction with the hero shooter elements, team play centered around the objectives, which is a great thing in my opinion. Yeah, of course, you will have games where you see people playing solely for kills, wandering around the edges of the maps, and not worrying about the objective at all. But for the most part, this really isn't the case, at least in my personal experience. Speaking of hero shooter elements, there are currently 5 factions you can pick from when you spawn into the game. The really cool thing about this game in regards to the factions is that the development team has access to all of Ubisoft's IPs, so they pull the factions from different Ubisoft games across the years. All factions have a unique ultimate, unique passive, and 2 tactical abilities that you may choose from when loading into a game. The Cleaners, who specialize in damage over time, area clear, and have access to incendiary rounds. Clearly, the developers never played Call of Duty World War II, and it shows. The Phantoms, who specialize in securing and defending areas and are thick with an extra 20 base HP. Echelon, who specialize in intelligence gathering and have access to what some would consider somewhat busted legal wall hacks. The Libertad, who specialize in self and team healing. For the most part, they're pretty self-explanatory, but their ultimate essentially just turns them into a bullet sponge and makes them almost unkillable. And DeadSec, who specialize in hacking enemy equipment or random robotic facehuggers from the Alien franchise that never cease to tilt me off the face of the earth. Graphics. Generally, not a defining trait of whether a game is good or bad, but it does help if a game doesn't make my eyes bleed out when I look at it. XDefiant has opted for more of a sleek and cartoonish style art design. Me personally, I like this art style, but I completely understand this is a subjective point of view. If you are someone who enjoys realistic art styles more, then you probably won't like it, and that's okay. However, I think objectively speaking, the game overall looks pretty good. The game is bright, vibrant, has good models and textures overall, and is a joy to look at. It won't wow you, but it is more than serviceable. The sound design, likewise, is also pretty good. The guns sound good to shoot, the notifications you hear when you're stacking up a kill streak suddenly build up more and more, making you hype as you continue on to higher streaks. Headshots sound beefy and are super satisfying to get, especially in rapid succession. Footsteps are also pretty well designed. They are loud enough and traceable back to the source for perceptive players. Footsteps aren't too loud, however, so it is still possible for you to push around and play aggressively, especially if things are popping off in the area you're moving around in. I will say that your own footsteps and allied footsteps are a bit too loud in my opinion, and I would enjoy it if they were tuned down just a little bit. Call of Duty obviously has better graphics and sound design than XDefiant, but XDefiant is still more than serviceable in these areas. Now let's talk about gameplay, and more specifically, the maps that the game is played on. Overall, the maps are pretty good. They're enjoyable to look at, generally have a really good flow to them, are intuitive, and are easily navigable after a few rounds, and are overall fun to play on. None really stand out to me as iconic and will stand the test of time like a Rust or Turnable from Call of Duty, for example, but they are still overall pretty good in my opinion. However, I believe as a community, we need to come to the consensus that Noodleplex is the best map in the game. We just aren't ready to have that conversation yet. Conversely, Echelon HQ makes me want to stick my arm in a blender, put out a cigarette on my newly obtained nub for an arm, while my girlfriend kicks me in the nuts. A tad extreme? Possibly. However, I never have to play that map, as people vote to skip that shit almost every single time it pops up in the pre-game lobby. So clearly, a decent number of people agree with me. Something I really appreciate about the map design is that there are specific maps made for specific game modes. Escort and Zone Control have their own set of maps, and the rest of the game modes have their own. I love this design, as this allows maps to be tailor-made with specific game modes in mind, which in turn allows for better game flow. In Call of Duty, all of the game modes need to be playable on every map. This in turn makes it so certain game modes feel great on some maps, but absolutely wretched on other ones. This is not a concern when it comes to XDefiant. As far as the gameplay itself is concerned, XDefiant is fast-paced, yet has a slightly longer time to kill. I enjoy this longer time to kill in FPS games, as it allows for longer gunfights, which subsequently allows for outplay potential, rewarding tracking, positioning, and movement, as opposed to whoever just lays their eyes on the opponent first. This game rewards good movement, great tracking, and the ability to hit headshots. Overall, most weapons in this game are balanced, and I never feel forced to run specific meta weapons when I want to do good. Sure, there are some weapons that stand out above the rest. I am looking at you, MP7. But overall, I feel I can take almost any weapon into any game, and as long as I'm on point and playing well, I can make them work. As mentioned before, XDefiant is a hero shooter. Different factions and their abilities add an extra layer skill gap to explore. Most of the factions are well balanced, and you can run any of them that you want to. Echelon stands out above the rest as it turns out, being able to wall hack and track people through walls is pretty good. Who would have thought? But ultimately, you can find great success with any of the factions, and teams will have the most success with a healthy balance of different factions working together to counter what the enemy team is trying to do. The movement adds another extra layer skill gap to the game. You can absolutely zoom around the map with the right builds. You can slide and jump as movement mechanics, and you maintain your main momentum in the air. This allows you to strafe and change direction without sacrificing all the speed that you built up while running. The longer time to kill, weaker aim assist, hero shoot elements, and movement all culminate in the game that's easy to pick up and play, but has a deep and meaningful skill gap to explore.
You like that? You like that?
Now, I did not make this review to simply glaze over the game as kids these days say. I am an objective GigaChat gamer, and as such, I have a responsibility to address the bad as well as the good. First, the netcode. I would describe it as, at best, inconsistent, and at worst, downright awful. Overall, as far as hit registration goes, in my personal experience, I want to emphasize that, in my experience, it feels pretty good for the most part. I don't have such a big ego that I can't admit when my aim is pure concentrated dog water. If my aim is good, I hit my shots for the most part. When my aim is bad, I miss. There are moments of inconsistencies, but nothing too crazy. What is egregious, however, is when it comes to netcode and hit registration is dying around walls. I cannot tell you how many times on my screen I have clearly made it around several feet of hard cover, and yet I'm still dying to someone who clearly did not have a line of sight on me. And I'm not the only one experiencing these things. If you look on the internet on any sort of social media platform like X or Twitter, whatever the heck it's called now, Reddit, YouTube, etc., you'll see a bunch of clips of the netcode completely screwing with people's gameplay. Now, the development team did address this and is currently working on the netcode, but that does not excuse that at the time of this review being made. In FPS games, milliseconds of precision are the difference between life and death, victory and defeat, and if netcode and hit registration are not crisp and consistent, the game is going to suffer and be held back. There have been gameplay concerns regarding bee-hopping and sniper rifles in the game since its launch. People considered the bee-hopping to be easily exploitable as there were virtually no downsides to spamming that form of movement. You only made yourself more difficult a target to hit as you add verticality to your player model, but you could also maintain your momentum and change direction in the air. As of June 13th, a new patch has just released that has enforced a steep aim sway penalty to your weapons if you spam the movement 4 times or more in rapid succession. I like this as a good middle ground compromise, as you can still engage with the movement the game has to offer, but you can't spam it to be a crutch to get out of a tough spot in prolonged firefights. And that's really where this adjustment's going to come into play, is prolonged firefights. In quick ones, 1v1, 1 or 2 jumps, you're not going to notice the difference. But in those prolonged firefights, you're not going to see people just spamming that stuff constantly. The snipers now also feel to be in a much better place. There is more flinch when ADSing with the sniper and getting shot at, but it doesn't feel impossible to compensate for that flinch. Also, if you have great reaction time and still aim really good, you can easily dominate lobbies with snipers. I am not the best sniper player in any FPS game by a wide margin, but I dropped a 50 bomb the other day while playing with my friend, and if I can do that, then anyone who actually puts in a lot of time with snipers will still find them to be very effective. The last, and possibly most concerning area of this game that I want to address, which I honestly haven't seen many content creators talk about, is a long-term monetization model that this game is going to use going forward. I mentioned before that XDefiant is a free-to-play live service model game which is going to release seasonal content and battle passes. XDefiant also features an in-game store where you can buy bundles and cosmetics in exchange for real-world money. Obviously, the game is going to have some of this to generate profit in some ways, as it's a free-to-play game. But I feel as though some of the items in the store are way overpriced compared to the product and value you're actually getting. This game's cosmetics cannot hold a candle to Call of Duty's cosmetics. There are a few good skins and weapons, camos here and there, but overall I just don't feel like they're that good and they're lacking in this department. But more importantly, I want to talk about game-altering content such as weapons and factions that are going to be added to the game in the future. Developers of XDefiant stated that any game-altering content will be attainable completely free, but also be purchasable via premium currency. My only concern is that they may enter a pay-for-convenience type of model, where while the items will technically be earnable for free, the challenges will be so time-consuming and tedious that you almost feel obligated to fork over a few extra dollars for the convenience of it. So far, the only taste we have gotten of this so far was with the DeadSec faction during the preseason. It took me about 5 to 6 days to unlock it for free, but in fairness, I did have a lot of real-world obligations going on at the time, such as work and family, so if you had more time to grind, you probably could have unlocked the faction half the time. So unfortunately, we have no way of knowing how consumer-friendly the monetization model is going to look going forward, and we're kind of in a wait-and-see pattern. But I do think players have a right to be skeptical and keep an eye out, as Ubisoft does not have the best track record when it comes to consumer-friendly practices. Overall, I have really been enjoying XDefiant. It offers a very simple, yet fun and rewarding gameplay loop that I just keep coming back to. Be that as it may, XDefiant hasn't done anything to really wow me. The best way I can describe it is that XDefiant does a lot of things really well, but doesn't do anything at a super amazing level. If I had to put a number rating on this game, I would give it a 7 out of 10. It's a fun game that has lots of untapped potential. If the developers can execute on that potential and iron out the glaring issues, this game can easily become a staple in FPS genre for years to come. But even if this game maxes out on its potential, however, it will never be a COD killer. I am convinced only COD can kill COD. But what XDefiant can do is take hold of a major section of the FPS market and player base. XDefiant can become a major success. And honestly, COD players should want it to do just that. If XDefiant is successful and pressures Call of Duty, COD will just become a better game, as they will have to innovate and improve in order to hold on to their player base and try to steal players back from the XDefiant player base. This will give arcade FPS players more options of great games that they can hop into and enjoy. There has been a lot of dishonesty surrounding XDefiant since its release. Between XDefiant fanboys who ignore the flaws of this game and dub it the COD killer to hype it up, to the COD fanboys who won't give it a fair shot and just want it to fail. This game's quality truthfully falls somewhere in the middle. It is a fast-paced, rewarding gameplay loop with a good skill gap. It has lots of untapped potential that, if executed properly, will be able to provide hours upon hours of fun content to enjoy. And I, for one, am excited to see where that takes us in the future of XDefiant. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Leave any feedback you have for me in the comments section below, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.